A security guard reached for my daughter's arm. She jerked away before he could touch her. "Mom!" Her voice cracked through the operating room so sharply that every conversation stopped. "Don't let them take your kidney." The room went dead silent. The anesthesiologist lowered the syringe in his hand. A nurse froze halfway through adjusting my IV. Even the heart monitor suddenly sounded louder. My 9-year-old daughter stood in the doorway, wearing her school uniform, rain dripping from her hair onto the polished hospital floor. She wasn't crying, she wasn't panicking, she looked terrified, but absolutely certain. Dr. Collins took one cautious step toward her. "Sweetheart, why would you say that?" Piper never looked at him. Her eyes stayed locked on mine. Then she pointed toward the operating room across the hallway where my older brother was waiting for the kidney that was supposed to save his life. "Because Uncle Ethan lied," she swallowed hard. "And if you do this surgery, my mom will lose her kidney for someone who already knows why his own stopped working." No one moved. Not the surgeons, not the nurses, not even the security guard. At that moment, I wasn't thinking about the operation. I wasn't thinking about my brother. I was staring at my daughter and wondering one thing. What could a 9-year-old possibly know that an entire transplant team didn't? If you've ever been told that family comes first, no matter the cost, stay with me until the end. Because what happened in that operating room completely changed the way I understand loyalty, sacrifice, and the people we're taught to trust the most. My name is Hannah Brooks. 3 hours earlier, I believed I was about to save my brother's life. I had no idea my daughter was about to save mine. 3 weeks before my daughter stopped an operating room, life was wonderfully ordinary. Every weekday at exactly 6:15, the smell of cinnamon drifted through our little townhouse before the sun had fully climbed over the rooftops. I wasn't much of a cook, but I made one promise to Piper the day her father moved out. No matter how hard life became, our home would always smell like breakfast. Some mornings, it was pancakes. Sometimes oatmeal with apples and brown sugar. When money was tight, scrambled eggs and toast somehow turned into what Piper liked to call breakfast royalty. She believed food tasted better if you gave it ridiculous names. I never corrected her. Our kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people. The cabinet doors didn't quite close. The dishwasher made a grinding noise every Thursday for reasons neither of us understood. One of the dining chairs leaned slightly to the left because I'd fixed it myself after Piper accidentally turned it into a pirate ship. It wasn't perfect. It was ours. Piper wandered into the kitchen, dragging the faded blue blanket she'd slept with since she was 4. Her hair looked like she'd wrestled a tornado. She climbed onto her chair without saying a word. I placed a plate of pancakes in front of her. She stared at them, then at me. "Mom, morning. Did you make dinosaur pancakes again?" I tried. They look more like roadkill. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the coffee pot. "Well, they're extinct. So technically, I wasn't that far off." She grinned. There it was, the smile that somehow made every difficult day feel manageable. People often asked if raising a child alone was exhausting. Of course it was. But exhaustion isn't the opposite of happiness. Sometimes they live in the same house. By 7:30, we were in my 12-year-old Subaru, heading toward Riverside Rehabilitation Center. Piper attended Lincoln Elementary, only 3 blocks away. So every morning we played the same game. We tried to invent stories about strangers waiting at traffic lights. "The man with the red umbrella?" I asked. "Retired spy." She answered immediately. "He secretly feeds pigeons because they're actually tiny government drones." "What about the woman walking 3 dogs? Definitely a superhero." "The dogs are her bodyguards." Every ordinary moment became an adventure with Piper. Maybe that's why I never noticed how lonely I'd become. Or maybe I simply got used to carrying loneliness quietly. The rehabilitation center sat beside the river, surrounded by maple trees that turned brilliant shades of orange every October. I loved walking through those front doors, not because the work was easy, because it mattered. Some victories happened so slowly that nobody outside those walls ever noticed them. Mrs. Delgado took 6 steps without her walker. Mr. Lewis buttoned his own shirt for the first time after his stroke. A teenage carpenter moved 2 fingers that doctors once believed would never move again. People called me patient. The truth was, my patience taught me patience. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Mom. I smiled politely at the screen, then turned it face down. She rarely called, and when she did, it was almost never about me. During lunch, I listened to the voicemail. Hannah. No hello, no how are you? Your brother's hosting everyone for Sunday dinner. 6 o'clock. Don't be late this time. The message ended. No mention of Piper. No, I'd love to see you. Just instructions. Some mother's invite. Mine scheduled. Sunday evenings at Ethan's house had followed the same script for almost 10 years. Mom cooked. Dad watched football. The cousins played in the backyard. Everyone admired Ethan's latest business success. The first time I brought Piper after my divorce, she'd been 6. She'd spent nearly an hour drawing a birthday card for her grandmother. Bright flowers, a rainbow, a crooked little house with smoke coming from the chimney. She carried it proudly all the way to Ethan's house. Grandma glanced at it, smiled politely, set it on the counter without opening it. 10 minutes later, my nephew handed Grandma a store-bought bouquet. She hugged him, took pictures, called everyone into the room. Look what my handsome grandson bought me. That night, after we got home, I found Piper quietly folding her drawing in half before slipping it into her bedroom drawer. She never mentioned it again. Neither did I. Some disappointments are too small to explain, too big to forget. Sunday arrived wrapped in golden afternoon sunlight. Ethan's house looked exactly the way luxury home magazines promised happiness should look. Stone columns, perfect landscaping, 3-car garage. The kind of place where nothing ever seemed out of position. Mom opened the front door before we even knocked. There you are. She kissed my cheek, then immediately looked past me. Did Ethan call? I've been trying to reach him all afternoon, I blinked. I just got here. Oh, she turned away before I finished taking off my coat. Piper quietly slipped her hand into mine. Children notice where conversations end. Dinner was beautiful. Roasted chicken, fresh bread, crystal glasses that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Ethan arrived almost 20 minutes late. Everyone stood up when he walked in. Mom's entire face lit up. There he is. My superstar, he smiled apologetically. Sorry. Meeting ran long. He looked tired, more than tired. His expensive tailored jacket hung looser than I remembered. The healthy color he'd always carried was fading. When he reached for the serving spoon, I noticed something odd. His hand shook. Just once. Barely noticeable. Nobody reacted. Not Mom, not Dad, not Carmen. Nobody except Piper. She watched him for exactly 2 seconds, then quietly went back to buttering her roll. Children don't spend their lives searching for secrets. They simply notice the things adults stop seeing. Halfway through dinner, Mom raised her glass. To family, everyone lifted theirs. To family, I did too. But as our glasses touched, I caught Ethan staring at his untouched plate. Not eating, not smiling, just staring. Like someone carrying a secret too heavy to swallow. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I suddenly remembered something Piper had asked me just 2 nights earlier. Mom, why does Uncle Ethan always look happy? Until he thinks nobody's watching. The question lingered in my mind long after dinner ended. At the time, I thought it was just another one of Piper's curious observations. I had no idea. It was the first crack in a story that would eventually lead all the way to an operating room. Tuesday began like every other Tuesday. By 8:30, the therapy gym was already alive. Parallel bars, exercise bikes, the steady rhythm of determination. Mrs. Delgado was celebrating her first full lap without stopping. Mr. Lewis insisted he no longer needed my help climbing the practice stairs. He absolutely did. I've got this, he grumbled. You've been saying that for 3 weeks. And one of these days I'll be right, I laughed. I'll be thrilled when you prove me wrong. That was the thing about rehabilitation. People rarely recovered all at once. Healing happened 1 stubborn inch at a time. I believe that. I taught it every day. I had no idea life was about to test, whether I believed it outside those walls. Around 11:42, my phone vibrated. Mom. I almost ignored it. She'd already left a voicemail reminding everyone about another family dinner next weekend. I assumed she'd forgotten something. Instead, the moment I answered, I heard something I'd never heard before. Fear, not irritation, not disappointment. Real fear. Hannah, her voice cracked. You need to come. What happened? It's Ethan. The hallway around me suddenly disappeared. What happened? He collapsed. When? About 20 minutes ago. They're taking him into intensive care. My stomach tightened. Which hospital? St. Matthew's. Please? Hurry. The line went dead. I stood frozen beside the parallel bars. Mr. Lewis looked up. You okay, kid? I realized I was still holding the therapy band in my hands. My brother's in the hospital. Beth, my co-worker, was already walking toward me. Go. I'll finish your afternoon patients. You sure? She nodded. Family. I gave a grateful smile. If only I knew how complicated that word was about to become. Piper was eating lunch in the school cafeteria when I arrived. She took one look at my face and quietly packed her backpack without asking questions. Children always know when something is wrong, sometimes before adults do. The drive to St. Matthew's happened mostly in silence. Rain clouds had rolled across the city, turning the afternoon gray. Halfway there, Piper spoke. Is Uncle Ethan going to die? The question landed like a stone. I don't know. She looked out the window. I hope not. So do I, she nodded, then added softly. Grandma would never smile again. I reached across the center console and squeezed her hand. Neither of us spoke after that. The intensive care waiting room was overflowing. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people I hadn't seen since Christmas. Everyone stood the moment we walked in, not because of me, because they were waiting for news. Mom crossed the room so quickly her purse slipped off her shoulder. There you are. She wrapped her arms around me. For a second, I forgot how long it had been since she'd hugged me. Then she pulled back. They're running more tests. Nobody knows anything yet. Dad sat alone beside the coffee machine. His hands were clasped together so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He looked older, not by years, by hours. Carmen stood near the window staring into the parking lot. Mascara streaked beneath both eyes. She looked as though she'd been crying since morning. When she saw me, she walked over and hugged me without saying a word. Her whole body shook. I thought I lost him. I held her a little tighter. So did I. Nearly an hour later, the ICU doors opened. A tall man in navy scrubs stepped into the waiting room. Family of Ethan Brooks? Every person stood. I'm Dr. Collins. I'm the attending nephrologist. The room fell silent. Dr. Collins glanced briefly at the chart in his hands before speaking. Your husband, your son, is alive. Collectively, everyone exhaled. But the relief disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. Mr. Brooks has severe kidney failure. He'll begin emergency dialysis this evening, Mom frowned. Kidney failure? That doesn't make sense. He's healthy. He owns fitness centers. He exercises every day. Dr. Collins gave the same expression physicians wear when facts refuse to match expectations. Unfortunately, kidney disease doesn't always look the way people expect, he paused. Based on his blood work, this didn't begin yesterday. It has likely been progressing for quite some time. The room became perfectly still. I looked toward Carmen. She stared at the floor, not surprised, not shocked, just heartbroken, almost as though she'd been waiting to hear those words. Later that afternoon, Dr. Collins asked to speak with immediate family privately. Mom, Dad, me, Carmen. He closed the consultation room door before sitting down. There is one piece of encouraging news. He folded his hands together. Living donor kidney transplants have excellent long-term outcomes. Mom leaned forward immediately. You mean someone in the family can save him? If they're medically compatible. We'll begin testing parents and siblings tomorrow. No one spoke. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Then Ethan's voice came from the doorway, weak, hoarse. Han? He had insisted on walking despite the nurse's objections. His hospital gown hung awkwardly from his shoulders, for the first time since we were children. My big brother looked fragile. He smiled when he saw me, a real smile, not the polished one from magazine covers, the kind I'd almost forgotten he had. I was hoping you'd come. I walked over. He pulled me into a hug, very gently. I'm sorry. For what? For not being a better brother. The words caught me completely off guard. I've spent years chasing work, money, Stupid things. His eyes filled. I should have been there after your divorce. I didn't know what to say, because I'd imagined hearing those words for 3 years. Now that they had finally arrived, they somehow hurt even more. I don't want to die, Hannah. His voice cracked. I don't want Piper growing up without her uncle. Something inside me shifted. Not because Mom expected me to help, not because family demanded it, because for one brief moment, I saw my brother, not the golden child, not the successful businessman, just a frightened man who suddenly realized life couldn't be negotiated like a business deal. The compatibility testing began the next morning. Blood, scans, medical histories, consent forms. Piper spent the afternoon drawing quietly beside the hospital window while nurses moved us from one department to another. Late that evening, Dr. Collins returned carrying a folder. I have the preliminary results. He looked directly at me. Ms. Brooks, you're an exceptionally strong match. Mom burst into tears. Dad closed his eyes. Carmen covered her mouth with both hands. Across the hallway, I saw Ethan lower his head. He wasn't smiling. He was crying, for the first time in years. Our family looked like a family again. Or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. As everyone gathered around Ethan's room, hugging one another and talking about hope, Piper quietly slipped out into the hallway. No one noticed, not even me. She had gone looking for a vending machine. Instead, she stopped outside a partially open office door. Inside, someone was talking on the phone. She recognized the voice immediately. It was Uncle Ethan. His tone sounded nothing like the frightened man who had hugged me minutes earlier. Calm, confident, almost impatient. I know. A pause. No. Another pause. Then the sentence that made Piper stop walking. She can't start asking questions now. The office door slowly clicked shut. And whatever came after that, Piper never heard. The hospital quickly became our family's new address. Every afternoon after work, I drove straight to St. Matthew's. Every evening, I left long after visiting hours ended. The nurses began recognizing me. One of them even stopped asking for my visitor badge. "You're Ethan's sister," she smiled. "We know." Funny. For years, I had simply been Hannah. Now I was becoming the donor. It wasn't something anyone said. It was something everyone assumed. 3 days after the compatibility results came back, Mom started a group text, Brooks family. It hadn't existed the week before. Now my phone buzzed every few hours. Pray for Ethan. His numbers improved today. Thank God Hannah was a match. Aunt Linda sent rows of praying hands. My cousins called me an angel. Even relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered my birthday. One uncle mailed me flowers. Another sent a gift card to a steakhouse. The attention felt wrong. Not because it wasn't kind, because it arrived all at once, like someone had flipped a switch. 3 years after my divorce, nobody had asked whether Piper and I were making rent. Now everyone wanted to know if I needed groceries, or help with laundry, or someone to mow my lawn. One evening, Piper watched me read another family message. "Mom? Yeah? If you weren't giving Uncle Ethan your kidney, would they still be texting you?" I looked up. She was coloring quietly at the kitchen table, crayons spread everywhere. She hadn't even looked in my direction. She was simply asking. I didn't answer, because I couldn't. By Friday, the transplant coordinator had scheduled my psychological evaluation. A woman named Dr. Elaine Foster greeted me with warm eyes and a notebook balanced on her lap. She wasn't there to evaluate my body. She wanted to evaluate my decision. "Tell me," she said gently, "why do you want to donate?" The question surprised me. Nobody in my family had asked why. They'd only asked when. I searched for the right words. "He's my brother," she nodded. "And I don't want him to die." And there it was again. That tiny question, as though she knew there was more. I looked down at my hands. I guess it's what families do. She didn't write anything for several seconds. Instead, she asked, "If you decided not to donate, what do you think would happen?" The answer came so quickly, it startled even me. They'd never forgive me. Silence. Then Dr. Foster quietly asked, "And would you forgive yourself?" I didn't know. That frightened me more than anything else. That evening, Piper insisted on visiting Ethan. She carried a small paper bag she'd decorated with bright yellow stars. Inside were homemade oatmeal cookies. Hospital food probably tastes sad. She announced it with complete seriousness. Ethan laughed. I think you're right. He looked better, not healthy, just less gray. Dialysis had helped. He accepted the cookies like they were something priceless. You still make the best cookies in town. I helped, Piper corrected him. Mom burns the first batch every time. I do not. You do. Ethan chuckled. For a few minutes, everything felt normal, almost. Then his phone vibrated. Again, exactly the way it had at dinner the week before. His smile disappeared. I'll be right back. He slipped into the bathroom connected to his hospital room. The door clicked shut. Piper continued arranging the cookies on the bedside table. Then she froze. Mom? What? She tilted her head slightly. Listen. At first, I heard nothing. Then, muffled voices. Ethan wasn't alone. He was talking on the phone. His voice was low, sharp, nothing like the gentle man who'd been joking with Piper 30 seconds earlier. I said stop calling me here. A pause. No. I'll handle it. Another pause. Then, if she starts asking questions, everything falls apart. My heartbeat slowed. Not because I understood. Because I didn't. Who was she? Carmen? Mom? Me? The bathroom door opened. Ethan stepped out smiling. So, what movie are we watching next Friday? As though the conversation had never happened. On the drive home, Piper sat unusually quiet. The city lights blurred across the rain-covered windows. She finally spoke just before we reached our neighborhood. Mom, can I ask something? You never have to ask permission, she nodded. When grown-ups lie? Do they always know they're lying? The question caught me off guard. I think, sometimes. And sometimes they convince themselves it's true. She looked out the window again. I don't think Uncle Ethan believes himself anymore. I glanced at her in the mirror. What makes you say that? He has 2 smiles. I frowned. What do you mean? The smile he gives people. And the smile that disappears. Every time his phone rings. Saturday afternoon, Dad unexpectedly stopped by my townhouse. He stood on the porch holding a cardboard box. I found these in the garage. Inside were old family photo albums, camping trips, Christmas mornings, birthday parties. Photographs from a life that suddenly felt like someone else's. Dad sat quietly on the couch while Piper flipped through the pages. Finally, he pointed to one picture. Ethan was 12. I was 9. We stood beside a fishing lake. I was crying. Ethan had his arm around my shoulders. You know why you were crying? Dad asked. I shook my head. You'd fallen into the water. You thought everyone was laughing. Weren't they? No. He smiled sadly. Ethan jumped in after you before I even reached the dock. I stared at the photograph. I'd forgotten. Completely. Dad looked at the picture for a long time. He really did love you. The room became very quiet. Then he added something that stayed with me all night. I just don't know. When he started loving something else more. Before I could ask what he meant, Dad stood. I should go. He reached the front door, stopped. Without turning around, he said, Hannah, if something doesn't feel right, don't let anybody rush you. Then he left. No explanation, no advice, just that one sentence. That evening, while putting the photo albums back into the box, a folded medical envelope slipped from between 2 pages. It wasn't old. The paper was crisp. The hospital logo was fresh. Someone had hidden it there recently. Across the front, in bold black letters, were 6 words that instantly tightened every muscle in my body. Confidential for Ethan Brooks only. I stared at the unopened envelope. Some instincts whisper. Others feel like someone grabbing your shoulder for the first time since agreeing to the transplant. I wondered whether my family was asking me to trust them. Without trusting me with the truth, I stared at the envelope for nearly a full minute. It rested in my hands like it weighed far more than a few sheets of paper should. Confidential for Ethan Brooks only. Fresh hospital letterhead. My brother's name. No postage. No crease from a mailbox. Someone hadn't mailed it. Someone had hidden it. Behind me, Piper was on the living room floor building an elaborate castle out of old playing cards. If you stack them too fast, she said, without looking up, they fall over. Children have a remarkable talent for saying exactly the thing adults need to hear, without realizing they're saying it. I slipped the envelope back into the photo album, not because I wasn't curious, because I already knew opening it would change something. Some doors only open once. Sunday morning, I returned the box to Dad. He was in the garage, sanding an old wooden rocking chair that had belonged to my grandmother. The smell of sawdust instantly carried me back 20 years. You didn't have to bring these back. I was driving this way, he nodded. Neither of us mentioned the envelope. Not immediately. Finally, I asked, "Did you put anything inside those albums?" His sanding stopped. Only for a second. "No." "You sure?" He looked at me, really looked at me. "I've learned something these past few weeks." "What's that?" "When people start hiding papers, it's usually because they don't want to answer questions." He turned the sander back on. Conversation over. That afternoon, the Brooks family gathered at the hospital cafeteria. Mom insisted we all eat together. Normal meals. Normal conversations. We have to stay positive. Nobody argued. Not even Ethan. He looked exhausted. His dialysis treatments left him pale and drained, but somehow he still managed to charm every nurse who walked into the room. He thanked everyone, remembered every name, asked about their children. Watching him, I almost felt guilty for doubting him. Almost. Lunch arrived. Soup, turkey sandwiches, fruit cups none of us touched. Halfway through the meal, Ethan excused himself. "I need some air." Mom immediately stood. "I'll go with you." "No." He smiled gently. "I'll only be a minute." He disappeared down the hallway. Without thinking, my eyes followed him. So did Piper's. She quietly put down her spoon. "I'm going to wash my hands." She slipped away. I barely noticed. 5 minutes later, she returned. She wasn't frightened. She wasn't excited. She simply looked thoughtful. Children don't always bring you answers. Sometimes they bring you better questions. She climbed back into her chair, took one bite of her grilled cheese, then leaned toward me. "So," quietly that only I could hear, "Mom, do hospitals usually have 2 pharmacies?" I frowned. "I don't know." "Why?" She shrugged. "I saw Uncle Ethan." "Okay." He didn't go outside. He went downstairs. There was a man waiting. "What man?" "I don't know." He gave Uncle Ethan a little paper bag. She held her hands about 6 inches apart. "Like this." I smiled gently. "It could have been medicine." "Maybe," she nodded. "But..." He looked around first. Before I could ask another question, Mom returned. "Ethan's resting. He needs everyone to stay positive." The conversation ended, but Piper's question didn't. Why would a hospital patient secretly meet someone in a hallway, instead of letting a nurse bring his medication? The next morning, I finally met with the transplant coordinator, not the surgeon, not the psychologist. A woman named Melissa, whose entire job was making sure donors never felt pressured. She smiled warmly as she closed the office door. "I ask every donor the same question," I nodded. "Okay. If everyone in your family disappeared for 24 hours, would you still choose to donate?" The room became very quiet. I looked down at my hands. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Melissa didn't rush me. She simply waited. Finally, I whispered, "I don't know." She nodded slowly. "That's an answer." I thought the answer had to be yes. "No." She smiled kindly. "The answer has to be yours." No one in my family had ever said that to me. Not once. When I left her office, I wasn't paying attention to where I was walking. I almost collided with Carmen. She looked startled. "Oh. Hannah. You scared me." She clutched a folder against her chest. Hospital papers, insurance forms. At least that's what I assumed. "You okay?" She hesitated, then smiled. "Just tired." Her smile never reached her eyes. As we stood there, a nurse approached. "Mrs. Brooks." Carmen turned. "Your husband left this in radiology." The nurse handed her a small black insulated case, exactly the size Piper had described. exactly the size she'd drawn weeks earlier. Carmen's fingers tightened around it, for just a heartbeat. Fear flashed across her face. Real fear. Then it disappeared. So unlike him, she forced a laugh. He's always forgetting things. She hurried away before I could say another word. I watched her disappear around the corner. Something wasn't right. Not because of the case, because of her expression. People smile when they're embarrassed. They smile differently when they're afraid. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about it, so after Piper had fallen asleep, I opened my laptop. Not to investigate, just to understand. I searched one simple phrase: kidney failure and anabolic steroids. Hundreds of medical articles appeared. Some talked about abuse, some about long-term kidney damage, some about hidden hormone treatments. I closed the computer almost immediately, not because I'd found proof, because I hadn't wanted to find the possibility. The following afternoon, Dr. Collins called. "Hannah, do you have a few minutes?" "Of course. I'd like you to come in." His voice was calm, professional, but something beneath it had changed. When I arrived, he closed the office door. He folded his hands. We repeated a portion of Ethan's laboratory work. I waited. The results. He paused. "Don't match his medical history." "What does that mean?" "It means either our tests are wrong, or someone hasn't been completely honest." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he asked a question that sent a chill through me. "Hannah, has your brother ever mentioned taking performance-enhancing drugs?" My heart skipped. Not because I knew the answer, because suddenly, Piper's little drawing, the hidden black case, the whispered phone calls, the mysterious paper bag, every scattered piece I'd tried so hard not to connect, began quietly sliding toward one another, like the first drops of rain. Before the storm finally breaks, the word steroids followed me home. Not loudly, quietly, like a song you couldn't stop hearing after it ended. I never mentioned Dr. Collins' question to Piper. She was only 9. She deserved homework, cartoons, and arguing with me about bedtime. Not conversations about organ failure. Not yet. That evening we planted tulip bulbs in the tiny flower bed behind our townhouse. It had become our spring tradition. Every October we buried bulbs beneath the cold earth. Every April they reminded us that some beautiful things needed time before anyone could see them. Piper pressed another bulb into the dirt. "Mom? Yeah? If somebody keeps making bad choices, does it mean they're a bad person?" I looked at her. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged. "I was just thinking." "About Uncle Ethan?" She didn't answer. Instead, she brushed the dirt from her hands. "I think people can lie because they're scared. But," she looked down at the flower bed, "they keep lying because they like what the lie gives them." For a moment, I forgot I was talking to a 4th grader. The surgery was scheduled for the following Monday, exactly 6 days away. Everything suddenly moved faster. More blood work, another CT scan, final consultations, insurance approvals, legal paperwork, one signature after another. Every form reminded me of the same thing. Once the surgery happened, there was no undoing it. Saturday afternoon, Mom invited everyone to Ethan's house. A little family dinner. We should spend time together before Monday. Nobody questioned it. By now, the entire family spoke about the transplant as though it had already happened. When Hannah wakes up, when Ethan gets stronger, when everything is behind us. Nobody said if, only when. During dinner, Mom stood and tapped her wine glass. "I want to say something." The room quieted. She smiled at me. "Hannah, I know I haven't always said it, but I'm proud of you." 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My cheeks grew warm. "This family will never forget what you're doing." Applause broke out around the table. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even people who hadn't spoken to me in years. It should have felt wonderful. Instead, I couldn't stop wondering something. If tomorrow the surgery were canceled, would they still be clapping? After dessert, I stepped outside for air. The October evening was cool. Leaves drifted across Ethan's backyard. Dad was already sitting on the patio swing. He handed me a bottle of water. "Too much excitement in there," I smiled. "You noticed?" "I noticed more than people think." We sat quietly for a while. Finally, he spoke. You remember when you were 12? You wanted that old telescope. I laughed. I saved all summer. You did. But Ethan wanted a dirt bike. I smiled faintly. So, Dad looked out across the yard. We could only afford one. The memories slowly returned. Mom bought Ethan the dirt bike. She told me we'd buy the telescope the following year. We never did. Dad's voice was barely above a whisper. I should have bought you the telescope. I looked at him, after all these years. That was the regret he'd carried. You were a kid, he shook his head. No. I was the father. Before I could answer, the sliding glass door opened. Ethan stepped outside. You two hiding from the party? Dad smiled. Just talking. Ethan walked over. For the first time all evening, he looked genuinely relaxed. He sat beside me. You know, I've been thinking. When this is over, I'm taking you and Piper to Italy. I laughed. Italy? You've always wanted to go. I stared at him. I'd mentioned that dream exactly once. 15 years ago. I couldn't believe he'd remembered. Maybe, I thought, maybe this really had changed him. Then his phone buzzed. Again, the smile disappeared instantly. I need to get this. He walked toward the side gate, not inside, away from the house. Something made me stand. I'll be right back. Dad looked at me. I wasn't sure why I followed him. Maybe curiosity, maybe instinct, maybe both. The backyard wrapped around to a narrow stone walkway beside the garage. I stopped before turning the corner. Ethan's voice carried through the darkness. Low, urgent. No? I told you, after Monday. A pause. I'm getting the transplant first. Another pause. No. My sister doesn't know anything, he laughed quietly. Trust me. She still thinks this is just bad luck. Every muscle in my body tightened. Then came the sentence that shattered whatever hope I'd still been holding on to. I'll be back in business before Christmas. Business? What business? Footsteps. I backed away before he rounded the corner. By the time I returned to the patio, my heart was pounding so hard I thought Dad could hear it. He looked at my face. What happened? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out, because I still had no proof. Only fragments. Always fragments. Sunday morning, less than 24 hours before surgery, my phone rang. Dr. Collins. Hannah. I need you to come in. His voice sounded different, careful, measured. When I arrived, he closed the office door. I asked Ethan again about performance-enhancing drugs, and he denied everything. Dr. Collins slid several lab reports across the desk. His blood chemistry says otherwise. He pointed to several highlighted numbers. I can't accuse someone based only on this. But I can delay surgery if I believe informed consent has been compromised. I looked up. You think he's lying? I think. He chose his words carefully. Someone isn't telling us the whole story. Just then there was a knock. A nurse stepped inside. I'm sorry, doctor. But Ethan's wife is here. She says she needs to speak to you privately. Carmen? The nurse nodded. Dr. Collins looked surprised. So am I. He stood. Hannah? Wait here. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Finally, the office door opened. Carmen stepped out first. She'd been crying. She couldn't even look at me. She hurried past without saying a word. Dr. Collins remained inside. His face had gone pale. He slowly sat back down, then asked me one question. Hannah, if tomorrow morning, before the anesthesia, someone gave you a reason to stop, would you stop? I stared at him. He raised a hand gently. Don't answer now. Just think about it. When I walked out of the hospital, the sky had already turned dark. Rain began falling before I reached my car. Across the parking lot, I spotted Piper waiting beneath the covered entrance with Mrs. Lawson. She waved enthusiastically. Then she ran toward me. Halfway across the parking lot, she stopped. She looked back toward the hospital entrance, toward Ethan, toward the small black insulated case hanging from his hand. She frowned. Very quietly, almost to herself, she whispered, Mom, why would Uncle Ethan need medicine? That he never lets the nurses carry. I followed her eyes. For the first time, I saw the case clearly, and in that instant, I knew tomorrow wasn't going to happen the way any of us expected. Monday arrived before the sun did. At 4:30 a.m., my alarm rang into a house that felt strangely unfamiliar. Not because anything had changed, because I knew I would never walk back through that front door quite the same. I moved quietly through the kitchen, started the coffee maker out of habit, then remembered I wasn't allowed to drink anything before surgery. The empty mug stayed on the counter. Piper padded downstairs in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She didn't say good morning. She wrapped both arms around my waist. Neither of us spoke for a while. Children understand silence better than adults think. Finally, I kissed the top of her head. I'll be home in a couple of days. She nodded. I know. You'll stay with Grandpa today. Another nod. I know, I smiled. You sound like you're 40, she looked up. I just don't want you to be scared by yourself. That sentence nearly broke me. I wasn't afraid of the surgery. I was afraid of waking up and discovering I'd made the wrong decision. By 6 o'clock, St. Matthew's Medical Center was already awake. Orderlies pushed empty beds through spotless hallways. Coffee carts rolled between waiting rooms. Nurses changed shifts while the night sky slowly faded into gray. Everything felt practiced, routine, as though hundreds of families had lived through this exact morning before ours. Maybe they had. A volunteer pinned a blue wristband around my arm. Living donor. The words looked heavier than plastic should. Mom met me outside pre-op. She kissed my forehead. I'm proud of you. For years, those were the words I'd wanted most. Strangely, they no longer sounded the way I'd imagined. Dad hugged me next. He didn't say anything. He simply held on a second longer than usual. When he finally stepped back, he slipped something into my hand. It was the tiny brass compass I'd given him for Father's Day when I was 12. I've carried this every day. His voice was barely above a whisper. I think you need it more than I do. I closed my fingers around it. I wanted to ask why, but a nurse called my name. The preparation room was bright enough to erase every shadow. A nurse helped me onto the bed. Another checked my identification bracelet. Dr. Collins walked in carrying my chart. You still have the right to change your mind, and the sentence surprised me. I know. I just wanted to remind you. He smiled kindly. No one, not your family, not your brother, not me, gets to make this decision for you. I nodded, then looked away, because I wasn't sure anymore whose voice I was listening to, mine or everyone else's. Across the hall, another team was preparing Ethan. I could hear muffled footsteps, the metallic rattle of surgical instruments, someone laughing softly, life continuing exactly as scheduled. A nurse drew a thick black line across my abdomen. Surgical markings, permanent ink for a permanent decision. The anesthesiologist adjusted my IV. We'll start in just a minute. I stared at the ceiling. One more minute. One more chance to ask myself whether I was doing this because I wanted to, or because I'd spent 34 years believing that love always required sacrifice. The oxygen mask settled gently over my face. Deep breaths. 1, 2, then. The operating room doors burst open. A security guard reached for my daughter's arm. She jerked away before he could touch her. Mom, her voice cracked through the operating room so sharply that every conversation stopped. Don't let them take your kidney. The room went dead silent. The anesthesiologist lowered the syringe. A scrub nurse froze with a tray of instruments halfway to the table. Even the steady rhythm of the heart monitor suddenly seemed louder. Piper stood in the doorway wearing yesterday's school sweater over wrinkled jeans. Her hair wasn't braided. One shoelace had come untied. Behind her, Mrs. Lawson leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. I'm sorry, she gasped. She ran the entire way from the parking garage. Dr. Collins stepped forward. Piper. What happened? She looked at him, then at me, then toward the operating room across the hallway where Ethan was already waiting. She swallowed hard. Before you do the surgery, ask Uncle Ethan to lift his shirt. Nobody moved. Dr. Collins frowned. What? Please? Her voice trembled. Just ask him. Mom rushed into the room. What is she talking about? Piper didn't answer her. She never took her eyes off Dr. Collins. The bruises. The room became even quieter. There are new bruises. On both sides. I saw them yesterday when his shirt came up. Mom shook her head immediately. She's a child. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Piper finally turned toward her grandmother. I know bruises. I see them every time Mom helps Grandpa after he bumps into things. They're different. She looked back at Dr. Collins. They're little circles. Lots of them. The surgeon's expression changed. Not because he believed her, because he remembered something. He slowly removed his gloves. When was yesterday? Piper answered without hesitation. In the parking garage. He dropped his black medicine case. When he bent over, I saw them. Dr. Collins didn't say another word. He walked out of the operating room. 2 physicians followed him. Mom called after them. Doctor, where are you going? No answer. Minutes crawled by. No one spoke. Then voices erupted from across the hallway. Not shouting, questioning, firm, professional. I couldn't hear every word. Only fragments. Remove the gown. We need to examine. This wasn't disclosed. Then Ethan, angry, louder than I'd ever heard him. This has nothing to do with the transplant, another physician answered. It has everything to do with the transplant. Silence. Then, no. You specifically denied injectable anabolic agents during your evaluation. Another silence, longer this time. The operating room door opened. Dr. Collins walked back inside. His face told me the answer before he spoke. The surgery has been canceled. Mom stood up so quickly her chair scraped across the floor. What? This is ridiculous. My son is dying. Dr. Collins remained calm. Your son admitted continuing anabolic steroid injections until less than 3 weeks ago. He also admitted withholding that information throughout his transplant evaluation. Mom stared at him. He was afraid. People lie when they're afraid. They do, Dr. Collins nodded. But informed consent only exists when everyone tells the truth. He turned toward me. Hannah. I'm sorry. We should never have brought you this far before every question had been answered. I slowly pulled the oxygen mask away. For several seconds, I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't even breathe properly. Then I looked toward Piper. She was still standing exactly where she'd entered, small, exhausted, terrified. But she hadn't run into the room to accuse anyone. She hadn't exposed a conspiracy. She'd simply remembered one detail that every adult had overlooked. I held out my hand. She ran to me immediately. I'm sorry, she buried her face against my shoulder. I didn't know how to make everybody listen. I wrapped both arms around her. No, my voice broke. You knew exactly how. 6 months later, Ethan was still alive. Addiction treatment had become part of his transplant requirements. His surgery remained on hold until an independent medical board cleared him. For the first time in his adult life, there were no shortcuts, no carefully managed image, no way to charm his way around the truth. Mom struggled with that reality. She spent weeks insisting the doctors had overreacted. Until one afternoon, Dad quietly placed the brass compass back on our kitchen table. I've spent 35 years letting everyone else decide which direction this family should walk. He looked at Mom. I'm done. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was the bravest thing I'd ever seen him do. As for me, I went back to work. Back to helping people rebuild lives one careful step at a time. Only now, I finally understood something I'd spent years teaching my patients, without ever believing myself. Healing doesn't begin when someone saves you. Healing begins the moment you stop surrendering pieces of yourself to people who never learned how to protect them. That spring, Piper and I planted sunflowers instead of tulips. By July, they stood taller than she was. One evening, she looked up at them swaying gently in the wind. Mom? Yeah? Do you know why sunflowers always face the light? I smiled. Why? She slipped her hand into mine. Because they already know. There's enough darkness behind them. I looked at my daughter, then at the fading scar where a surgeon had almost changed my life forever. For years I thought love meant giving until there was nothing left. A 9-year-old girl taught me something far more important. Sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever give the people you love is the courage to ask one more question.